Hello and welcome to another episode of History of Westeros podcast, a podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series mostly, but today, Game of Thrones. And mostly Game of Thrones.
Mostly Game of Thrones, but with a lot of discussion of how things parallel the books. This is our companion episode to Season 4, Episode 4, Oathkeeper. I'm wanting to call it Oathbreaker.
This is the spoiler-filled edition.
That's right. There was so many things that happened in the episode that deserved some spoiler discussion treatment that we decided we just had to talk about it, and we didn't have enough time at the end of the credits for our other episode, which we needed to keep under 2 hours, so why not just make a second, shorter episode? And that way things are a little more segregated as far as spoilers and non-spoilers too. So, let's get into it. As you've probably already listened to our other episode, and certainly seen the episode, you don't need to be primed on the main discussion points here, so we're just going to jump right into how this affects these revelations about Night's King, mostly, if it truly is Night's King, which it really seems to be. I'm doubtful that that slip-up by HBO was a mistake in putting the wrong name in the wrong place. It was, in other words, we believe it was an accidental spoilering, something they didn't mean to reveal, rather than something that they say mislabeled.
But it has to be said that the latter is possible.
Yes.
It is possible that they ran to write the White's King. As I cracked the joke, it's one letter off. But it's just, it is technically possible. They aren't writing those episode viewer guides that's just made by some lower down person who maybe just had some things wrong. We lean towards the former, though.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that the script, for example, refers to this character as Night's King or something like that. Uber White Walker. I don't know what they would call it, but it does seem like it does seem like that is what happened, and that this character is Night's King, and we have been. It's going to take a while for some of this to sink in. We saw this episode yesterday. We'll probably have more thoughts on it in a week or two. More and more thinking will happen. More and more tracing back. Redoing some of the theories that have previously existed and seeing how this new information retcons them, I guess you could say, how it all changes. Certainly one of the major theories that's impacted by this is the notion that Stannis is somehow reliving the Night's King arc. Something that I liked on the surface, though I had a hard time seeing how Stannis could really turn...
There could still be parallels between them.
Some parallels, right.
And there's,
what I meant was that he
to the reader and not so much in the text.
What I meant was that he's not going to become Night's King.
Yeah.
He's not, and I always had trouble seeing how he could turn that dark in the first place, because Stannis is not a bad guy.
Yeah, I had never seen that part of it. I had just seen that there are some nifty, just interesting similarities between them, and that can be fun to think about, like why George wants us to think about that. And so I still think there is maybe significance there. But yeah, I personally was never really fond of the theory that he was going to get to that level. And if this is what the Night's King is, I certainly don't think Stannis will look like that.
Yeah, a lot of the parallel would be the idea that Melisandre was somehow ensorcering him, which certainly has happened to a certain degree, and alongside the notion that the Night's King was supposedly ensorcered by this half other bride. Now, this is a common folk tale. It happens a lot in history and it certainly happens in Westeros as well. There's a lot of examples of it. And what I mean is, when there's a king or a high figure, a high ruler figure, and there's an unusual woman that he's associated with, whether it's his queen, because it's a patriarchal society, what ends up happening a lot is the woman is blamed for the man becoming bad. Like, she's the reason he became a bad person. It's really stupid, but it's really common. We see it with the Defiance of Duskendale, where the Lord Darklyn held King Aerys hostage, and he was tortured and beheaded, but his wife, who was a foreigner, it was said that she was the one that had so much to do with this plan, and that it was her influence over him. Her end was far more brutal and directed at her femininity. They tore off her genital. I mean, it's disgusting. And so this is a common thing in real history too. The Romans one of the favorite things the Romans like to talk about in their folklore is the evil stepmother. It's a really common trope. So it's just this silly patriarchal thing that is part of our society to a lesser degree, but is a big part of Westeros, obviously. So it gets wrapped up in this story as well. They're blaming this other woman for making Night's King a bad person, when why not blame him? Anyway, it's an old story, it's a myth, so the details are already just lost to history, but it's funny that that notion somehow survived, that the woman is to blame. So Stannis, that really impacts his... What do you think that means for him instead, if he's not going to become some sort of parallel to Night's King? Although, like you said, and I agree with, there are still a lot of parallels that could take place. I wonder what that means for his fate. I guess there'll have to be some rewriting of what people expect from him in the end. And one possible end, I imagine, for him was that he would become the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch somehow. Maybe he just dies fighting. Maybe he just goes down. He's a stubborn man. He's gonna, like they said, he'll break before he bends, and that might be what it takes. And he may just be doomed, but in a different way than we predicted. So, or that some of us predicted, or we sort of predicted. We were never saying this is definitely going to happen. It was just a theory. So, anyway, there certainly is a lot to say about the way these people were dressed and the ties to the Rangers and to the ancient Night's Watch and to its founding. And we wonder if some of the things to do with the founding of the Night's Watch were either corrupted by Night's King, or, if you want to get more crackpot, perhaps Night's King's situation is more to the true origin of the Night's Watch. Perhaps he is actually doing what was supposed to be done in terms of how the Night's Watch original vows were, or something along those lines. It's pretty difficult to pinpoint. It's really difficult to get a handle on. It's also very vague. But it really is thought-provoking. It's really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people out there are really rethinking a lot of things. And hopefully we're able to capture a lot of it today, because if we have more thoughts later, it might be a while before we're able to revisit it. Although maybe we'll just revisit it in a future episode of the TV. Well, we don't know what's coming later this season. I certainly wouldn't have expected something like this.
In Magic episode, we might have reasons just to mention a thought.
That's true. We may have to do a Night's King episode, especially if there's a little more detail on it. I'm not sure there's enough for us to sink our teeth into right now. Yeah. It's just too vague. Yeah. But maybe there'll be some more TV show information that we can reasonably rely on as potentially canon to the books. And we'll dig into that, but we'll have to see where that goes. Now, also, we should consider the possibility that this will affect how George writes the rest of the story. If they spoiled something or did it in a way that he didn't envision, or that's too different from the way he envisioned it, maybe this isn't really that big of a spoiler because it won't happen in the books. Maybe...
Be like, that looks dumb.
Yeah, George is like, that is not at all what I had in mind. What the heck are you doing?
Or he's like, that's kind of what I had in mind, and now it's not going to be.
Yeah.
He was like, I did envision him having spikes, and now there won't be.
Or maybe he's like, wow, that's a really good idea. What a great way to do it.
Yeah,
I'm going to do it that way.
We don't know.
Should give them some credit, too.
So when it comes to spoilers, I mentioned this in the previous episode. When it comes to this is spoiling the book, I won't really feel like something is spoiling it until, and even then I won't feel too strongly about it until George himself posts on his blog, not a blog, and says, yeah, that's a spoiler, he says, yeah, that's in the books, in the future. Then I'll know, but until then I'll just keep second guessing myself, and it'll never be completely for sure for me. And even the Night's King thing, I think it's pretty strong, but I just don't know, and I don't know if that's even what he wrote in the books. I just don't know.
Yeah, we certainly know that Dave and Dan and some of the other writers have had discussions with George. He's revealed things about the future of the series, but he couldn't have given them some book to work off of. I'm sure they took notes in conversations with him. So you never know. They got a detail wrong. They embellished a bit, or it could be right down the middle of what George is looking for. All these things are possible. A lot of people out there are having a lot of hate for this episode.
I wonder if he might say something any day now. Maybe he'll just keep mum. That would probably be the smartest thing to do. That's what I would prefer him to do, just not make a comment on it.
Yeah.
Just to keep me guessing, and maybe, depending on, and we can see where the season goes, and that would be cool, but
it would almost, I see what you mean. It would almost be a disappointment for him to say too much about the scene, because it'd be hard for him to comment on it without getting spoilers. We're particularly good at deducing spoilers and new information based on the way information is presented, and a lot of you guys are the same way. In fact, a lot of you listeners have given us things that you've noticed, and we've in turn put them on our show and acted like we came up with them on our own. No, just kidding. We usually give credit where credit's due. We forget occasionally, but that's life. So we can't assume that this isn't what George had in mind. A lot of people are out there saying, you're ruining the story, you're changing what George had in mind. Really? Is it that big a change? The stuff with Bran and Jon, is it really that big a change? I don't see it. I don't think it is. It might be.
Yeah.
It might be. But I'm not ready to just sit here and say that's a huge change. Because I don't know. I think that's just too early. It's too early to say that. We don't know. And as I alluded to in our companion episode, the path to get to the end from the book and the show is going to be different, but the end point is probably still going to be similar. And of course, there's no just end point. There's a bunch of different plot lines, and they're all going to have their own end points. Some of them are going to merge with other plot lines. Some of them are going to do all sorts of crazy things on the way to get to where they're going. If the show and the book kind of wind up in the same place, I don't think it matters a whole lot how they get there, as long as they don't make just ridiculous random changes. And I think a lot of people are thinking of these things that we've seen in this last episode as just that, ridiculous random changes. But I don't agree. I just don't. I think they could be ridiculous random changes. The jury is still out. We're still waiting. Yeah. We'll see.
So to continue with that, I'm talking about the brand changes in particular and what that could mean and what that plot line could change. There's a few things. One in particular that I'm kind of concerned about, which is Alice Karstark. They've already changed the Thenns, and I thought maybe it would allow the marriage between Alice Karstark and Sigourney to be, more surprising and just shocking, and to show that they're actually working towards this. And I don't know what they could have done with it. I thought they would maybe still go through with it, but this Bran plotline serves a similar function in regards to Jon having conflict with regards to wanting to find a member of his family that he cares about, and it may be conflicting with his Night's Watch oath and him having to balance that, unlike when he left with Robb earlier, and when he left to try to get Robb, originally, as they referenced in this episode. And so I find myself doubting that they will repeat this type of plot line, even though they're obviously very different in what happens, and Bran goes off to Craster's Cave. Like, obviously that's not the same, but I feel like they serve a similar function.
I agree with that. And to go back briefly to Alice Karstark, I wonder if, and this hadn't occurred to me before we started recording, I'm kind of just thinking of this now, they could just have her marry some other wildling, I guess.
Yeah, they could.
It might be...
She could marry Tormund, and then he could start a dynasty if he had the giant thing.
Har.
I don't know what his... Yeah, House Har. I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, that could happen, I suppose.
I can't see... I guess, yeah.
Yeah, Tormund hasn't talked at all about having a wife and kids in the show. Maybe they've eliminated that. That could be their way of...
That's true.
Of doing that.
But yeah, there's ways that we could still get Alice, but I'm most concerned with these plot lines. The thing I'm most concerned about is definitely Alice Karstark might not be in the show, and I was fond of that plot line.
It's also interesting because it's hard to also figure out whether that plot line is important.
Yeah,
that plot line has just started in A Dance of Dragons, and maybe it's an easy thing to cut, but maybe the Thenns or some sort of wildling presence at Carhold is actually really important.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
We'll have to see. That's something that is, like a lot of these things, is really hard to pass judgment on because we just don't. It's like judging a show halfway before it's over, and that's kind of where we're at. We're halfway through the season, not quite. We're almost halfway.
But the other point we had this might affect is a smaller one, but it deserves to be considered, is later on when Stannis offers Jon Winterfell. And Jon says, Winterfell belongs to my sister Sansa. Well, he's probably... will he say Sansa? Would he say Bran? Would he say Rickon? Depends on if he meets Bran. If he gets to actually talk to Bran and agree to keep his secret, and things work out and nothing goes wrong and he actually sees him, then he'll then say Rickon unless Bran tells him to like asks him to keep that a secret. Then will he say Sansa? Well, he just probably won't say the line at all. It's a fan favorite line, I think, and it's nice, but that isn't too important. But
yeah, if you were to take stock of how
what
important
is how that will just how it has to go down in a very certain way, because if he just says that to Stannis, it's for my brother Rickon, or if he mentions Bran or Rickon, and would he keep it a secret, it just puts the Stannis Jon scenes in a little bit of a different light, I think.
He's going to have to refuse in a different way, maybe for different reasons. He still he may still have to tie it to the old god somehow, because that's a really major part, as we covered in our Werewoods episode. Yeah. Jon's, as he's making the decision, Ghost approaches him, and he notices that how Ghost's eyes and coloring are so similar to a werewood, to a heart tree, and this is ultimately makes his decision. He says, okay, the old gods, this is what matters, his vows and who he is. He might just do the old, I'm not a Stark, you can't make me a Stark, it's just how it is, I'm the Lord Commander, or whatever.
And he just keeps Bran's secret. But the thing is like, if he doesn't talk to Bran and doesn't interact with him, I can't see Jon just letting it go, and maybe he wouldn't mention it to Stannis. Like, I feel like he would mention it to Stannis, but I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I feel a little bit more that he would say something, unless he interacts with Bran, which brings another host of problems. Which, what about, like, they would talk about Rickon, and I
wonder about Rickon in a different light, because you wonder if because certainly there are Northerners in the book who know about Rickon, and are they ever going to tell Stannis? I wonder. I think they might. Certainly the Northerners who know about Stannis, or who know about Rickon, are not with Stannis for the most part, as far as we know. And I know that a lot of this revolves around the old...
They could circumvent the whole not to interrupt you, but they could circumvent, I wouldn't like them to, but, Davos at
going to
White
Skagos.
Harbor.
Yeah.
But they could just have him go directly there or something. If he's with Stannis and Jon tells Stannis, Rickon went towards Skagos, or he went he went there, he's probably there. That's potentially possible. I feel like, I don't think it's a huge change between him going to White Harbor, and I feel like they would want to show the Manderleys anyways. So I don't know that it really matters too much there.
And I think they can come up with a good reason for why Jon would refuse Stannis that's still very meaningful, besides just that it's his family that belongs to Sansa.
My main concern is just that I don't know that Jon would keep it a secret, period, and depending on if he talks to Bran or doesn't.
Okay, and the other...
Because he's concerned at the moment.
That makes sense. But would Jon fear for Bran and Rickon if Stannis knew about them? I don't think he would. I don't know that that Jon would think Stannis is a threat to them. He intends to he certainly intends to rescue...
I think it's likely that he would tell him, which I think might change a few things.
Right, but I don't mean... What I mean is that it wouldn't change anything significant, because Stannis is still pro-Stark. He's still... He in his mind, he wants a Stark to rule Winterfell, because that will get the Northerners in line, and he can have control through that. So, having Stannis find out that there are other Starks out there, what does that really change? I don't think it changes much at all. He doesn't want Sansa to get Winterfell, Stannis that is, because Sansa is tied to the Lannisters. But if Bran or Rickon appears, that's great for him. He wants a Stark to rule.
Well, I guess Jon has to... maybe he's already thinking this, but maybe he has to... Bran is not going to be able to be the Lord of Winterfell.
Right,
Jon
he can't produce
be
heirs,
like
necessarily.
Like if Jon were to lead Stannis on to thinking that they need to find Bran, that would just be a hopeless chase. So there has to be a reason for Jon not to tell him Bran's name.
Okay.
But Rickon would be fine, and it would maybe make things more direct too between them. But
perhaps, although if given where Bran is, telling Stannis that he's out there, how's he going to find him?
Well, yeah, that's true. I just mean that would Stannis be like, well, we don't need to look. Would he still look for Rickon, or would he be sending more? Like, would he be looking for Bran? I feel,
Yeah, it's hard to see how that would play out. But the bottom line is it doesn't seem like a huge divergence from the books.
We're just talking about what could potentially cause a problem or cause a bigger divergence later down the line. And these are some of the few things, and there's not a lot, but we want to mention them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it seems like we're discussing these things, and I hope some of you guys are at least, maybe if you were angry about some of these changes, I hope that maybe this is softening you up a little bit, because ultimately I think a lot of things are going to end in the same place. Jon refusing Winterfell. That's still going to happen probably. If he refuses it for slightly different reasons, is that really that big a deal?
Though, to be fair, I can understand finding it a big deal when it's like your favorite little plot line, or it's like John, like there are some things you're just going to like how they did it more in the books,
Yeah.
and they're gonna pile up, and sometimes they just screwed around with too many of your favorite plot lines, and
Yeah.
that's reasonable too.
That is
I don't
reasonable.
think there should be I think there are maybe some unreasonable reactions, but I feel like it's also very reasonable to feel close to the material and to want them to do it justice and to want them to not always take the easy way,
Some of these things do seem like the easy way, but again,
It's TV,
we haven't seen. Yeah, it is TV.
TV,
That's true.
and-
It has to be easier sometimes,
It's like-
and we haven't seen how they're gonna. We haven't
Yeah.
seen the full arc. They might end up doing some really clever things. They might do some new things. Look, come on. I mean, anyone who's complaining right now, and once again, I don't say you shouldn't complain. And Ashay put it in better terms than I did, but consider all the great scenes that aren't in the show or that aren't in the books, that like certain character pairings like Arya and Tywin or Olenna and Tywin. They are capable of doing different things well, and I say at least give them a little benefit of the doubt. Wait till they actually screw up, if they're going to, before saying that they've screwed up. This is not. It's too soon, in my opinion. And I'm not saying if you think it's not too soon, I won't challenge your opinion on that. But I do like to provide different perspectives because, I don't like seeing, personally, I don't like it when people get upset. Not because they don't have a right to, but because I like harmony and I like seeing the showrunners treated fairly. And sometimes people judge them too quickly. And that's just my opinion.
I think also a lot of people are more willing, are looking for more flaws, especially this week as well. After last week,
That's a good point.
I think that people are just looking for things to dig at them with, and I feel like they had enough last week. Yeah, I wasn't here to discuss it, but I think they deserve all the flack they get for portraying what they said was not a rape scene as a rape scene. So.
Yeah.
I don't think they should have it. I think a lot of people maybe are just slightly taking that out on them this week. I think reactions are just slightly stronger.
I hadn't considered that. That's a good point. Some people are still a little raw from last time, and maybe
like,
they were.
They suck. They're worth. This is the last straw now. They
were already a little on edge.
They came back another
before.
week after that, and they're like, they didn't even address that, and now we're seeing all this stuff, and they're changing things. And book readers are maybe just even more turned off, and some are maybe like it's more freeing to be like, okay, well they're just really diverging, or they're just really doing their own thing. I can let go more now.
There has been a wide variety of reactions. A lot of people are like, yes, show us things that the book isn't showing us. The other's plot is dragged on so long. We haven't seen these things. There's no chance to see them. I like that part of the plot being advanced. Other people are like, you're ruining George R. R. Martin's vision. It's a huge... how can those two opinions coexist? It's strange to me that... obviously they can, and they do. But to me, it's like, wow, look at that variety, that the range of opinion is so big. Yeah. And there's not a lot of middle ground, I guess. We're kind of middle ground with it, I suppose. At least we're entertaining both sides of it. Yeah. But a lot of people, it seems to be a very polarizing issue. A lot of people are like, this is terrible. A lot of people are like, this is awesome. It's
I don't like to say overly hateful things about people who put a lot of work into it, even if I think they do it maybe not exactly how I would like them to do it.
That's a good point.
I'm sure they would never see this video or a quote from it or anything, but I feel terrible whenever anyone says anything mean about me. I try to be a little bit more balanced.
Yeah.
As you said.
Yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't ever do any good. It's mostly people calling people names, calling the showowners names, calling us names, calling each other names. That's usually just venting. It's rarely something, if you were ever to sit down and be without emotion, sit down and write a criticism of somebody or some TV show or some writer, you would never call them names. If you were at your best and trying to logically and reasonably describe your criticisms, you would never just call somebody a name. So to me, that stands out as something that people are having an emotional reaction, which is not a bad thing. It's not wrong to have an emotional reaction. But a lot of times emotional reactions aren't where you'd be a week later. After a week of thinking and having it simmer and settle, a lot of people change their opinion. But some people stick to exactly where they were and they maintain their opinion. And sometimes that's stubborn and sometimes it's justified. Sometimes in the end they end up being right. But once again, we don't know where they're going with so much of this. It's really hard to judge, in my opinion.
There was one that one quote that we wanted to make sure we mentioned.
Yes.
I think maybe that's the only thing. Maybe you have something else. Was that when Bran has that dream, vision?
Yeah.
And he said, it goes north and north and north. He looked to the curtain of light at the end of the world, and then beyond that curtain. He looked deep into the heart of winter, and then he cried out, afraid, and the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. And and then says, winter, and then it ends with, because winter is coming. And wanted to know if we thought if that was connected to where this White Walker
I
went.
think it is. I think he was maybe catching a glimpse of the only way, given what we said earlier, this is the only way for a POV character to remotely see any of this, see in air quotes there. And another part of that scene, which is, of course, this is Bran in his coma after he's been thrown out the window by Jaime. He also sees other dreamers impaled on like dream spikes or like shards of ice. It's a very interesting scene that probably bears further analysis now. This is a good time to go back to that. We might have to tackle that a bit when we talk more about dreams and prophecies, which will be in a future
a beast.
Proper history episode. Yeah, it won't be one episode. That's a multi-part series action that we'll get to at some point. And that I recommend going back and checking that out. It's probably only Bran's like second or third chapter, and probably his third, maybe his fourth. So there's some tie-in to what we've seen there, and the magic of the White Walkers and how they all work, and something's in there. There's some clues in there. I bet there's some new nuggets waiting to be discovered. Well, we're gonna have to go back and look at some of that stuff with this fresh perspective. Another thing that I think I started to address earlier this episode that I didn't really finish the thought on was the notion that George is willing to change things or adjust his own plans based on what the show has done. Our best example of that is the Mercy spoiler chapter, which was released in very peculiar timing based on the scene that came shortly after its release, which was the Sandor Arya scene and her getting her acting out her revenge on Polliver. Very similar to the way she takes revenge on Rafa Sweetling in the Mercy chapter. So that tells us George is willing to change his mind. And of course, a lot of this is just kind of burbling in his head. He doesn't have a lot of outlines and stuff that he's written out. He's got it all up there, so he can change it. He describes his writing process as being a gardener, whereas a lot of writers are architects. They plan it all out. They plan outlines and structures and have it very set in advance, which is pretty hard to do with an epic this size. Not though some people have done it. It's a lot of them didn't even stick to their plan. Wheel of Time comes to mind. Now, with George R. R. Martin, as I said, he describes himself as a gardener, and he lets the things grow, and he adjusts as they grow and get bigger and change, and he sees what he's got after it's had a while to percolate and develop. And I think that makes sense, because with a really creative mind, you can't possibly predict your own creative outlook later down the creative process. Painting, let's say you're painting and you paint halfway through and you realize that this isn't what you had in mind, but it's still awesome, and you can just do it differently than what you envisioned. This is kind of what George does. That can cause problems for something on this scale with so many different plot lines crisscrossing in it. That's probably why some of these books have taken so long. But I'm not disappointed with the product at this point. I don't think this is a bad thing. Every artist has their own method. So that was a long way of describing that. I think that there's a very decent chance that whatever's been done in the show, if George doesn't like it, he won't do it that way.
Most of your ways are long ways. It's something I'd say.
I'm not short-winded very often, am I? I sure like to use air quotes a lot too, don't I?
You too. But no.
Thank you.
Did we talk about cold hands?
We did not really talk about cold hands. That's a major topic here. Cold hands theories have been I mean, there's been 13 years of Cold Hands theories ever since he appeared in A Storm of Swords. People were calling him Benjen, calling him Night's King, calling him Random Ranger. Like people like to point out the line that Leaf, the Child of the Forest, says that they killed him long ago, and given that Leaf is an ancient creature herself, that perspective could mean that this Cold Hands was killed long ago, long ago. Then again, Leaf is speaking to a young child and might be adjusting her language for that person's perspective. So long ago might only be a couple of years. I do not think Benjen's is Cold Hand. I will say that Cold Hands. I will say that straight out. I don't see it. I don't really buy it. But I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's ludicrous. I don't think it's silly either. I just don't think the evidence points to it. I don't have another theory. I don't know where the hell Benjen is. It's not like I have some alternate idea. If I did, that would certainly help me prove that Cold Hands isn't him. But
I tend to lean towards him being no one truly important.
Yeah, he might not even appear again in the books. Which, by the way, this is one thing that the show can tend to spoil for the books that people don't tend to point to. The important characters don't get cut from the show. So if a character's cut from the show, that almost kind of tells you that they're not important in the books.
There are examples that allow us, like the Tyrells, who we've been told they'll be more important later. And that will cause them problems, and other examples. And so it's not for sure, but it certainly gives you a little bit more of an idea.
It leans things the other way. It leans things towards them not being important. It is not definitive. Like Ashea said, the missing Tyrells, Garland and Willis. George has already gone on record saying they're going to have trouble with that omission. Some of the other omissions aren't so bad. Strong Belwas was a fan favorite, but as we pointed out last episode, Danny's description of why Strong Belwas was perfect for the fight, because he's expendable, was also a perfect description of why he didn't need to be in the show. Sad as that is.
And we're thinking that is likely, at this point, true of Cold Hands.
Yeah, as sad as that is, because Cold Hands is cool, he's awesome, he's unique, he's an outlier.
But
maybe he's not that important.
But maybe there is still a shot for us to have him, and this would intersect with Bran and John potentially just not John getting there and Bran isn't there, and that way there's no conflict there. Now it would work with that, which is that Cold Hand saves.
Now that's a good point. Bran and his friends there, Jojen, Mira, and Hodor, are certainly in those books. Rather, what I was trying to say is that the deserters, the Night's Watch deserters, exist in the book as well. They certainly don't do these same things. They're not, a big part of. They're not lingering at Craster's Keep nearly as much, apparently. Cold Hands just goes off and kills them by himself with his ravens, and I don't know if he has any other help, but he kills them, and that's how they get killed in the book. So if they want to stick to that, they still could stick to that. Cold Hands could show up and save them from these evil rangers and go ahead and take off.
Away.
And
John
doesn't.
Maybe just gets there because we see John fighting. So John fights and then he's fighting. And he's gonna talk to Bran afterwards, and Bran's gone.
Or they just show up and they're like.
Or they have a conversation
bunch of dead rangers. They show up and they're like, whoa, someone.
Well, they showed scenes of John. I think it looked like he was fighting them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I
haven't seen.
I think it was.
He's fighting somebody. Maybe he's fighting.
I think it looked like it was around Craster's Keep specifically, and also I guess Cold Hands could just let goes free. But he's going there Anyway, so.
Huh. Now, as far as the possibility that Cold Hands was this White Walker delivering the baby to Night's King or whoever that turns out to be, there's a few theories about that. Some of the camera angles, they were kind of showing his hands a lot, I guess. Some people have that pointed out. I didn't really think that meant that much. They just don't want to. They just don't want to focus on the White Walker's face ever. They always want to show just glimpses of their faces. That's just how they do it. So what else are they going to show? The horse's face. The horse's legs. They showed the landscape a lot. They kept showing the guy from a distance. You couldn't really get a good look at his face. They showed reflections of his face a lot. And of course, like you mentioned in the earlier part of the episode, our companion episode, Michelle MacLaren, the director, loved to show these great facial shots. In that final scene, she was showing reflections of facial shots.
Yeah.
And the actual faces, but they were
Which
very
is interesting,
brief.
actually.
Yeah, it is really
that.
interesting.
We saw a lot of obscure. It's kind of Yeah, kind of like a metaphor that there are like a lot of the faces were obscure and we couldn't just like that plot line is.
They don't want to give us great looks at it. Of course, with technology, we can freeze frame, and there's gifs of gifs. I always do that.
Yeah.
Online of
he knows I hate it.
I just do it accidentally. I hate it too. I don't know why I say that. Of people taking screen caps of the horned. The Darth Maul guy Darth Maul Night's King.
I saw someone put a mashup of Darth Maul and some guy from one of the Thor movies that looked like similar.
Frost Giants.
Yeah,
the Frost
Giants.
They
were,
they do kind of look like that.
You combine the two of them, except where did the blue eyes come from? They both have red eyes. But anyways, definitely reminded me of Darth Maul. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I hadn't even thought of that at first.
Yeah, and so Cold Hands, I don't think that's him. I don't think that he's the one delivering the baby. I don't think that it's necessarily that important that he's gone, but there is still an opportunity for him to appear. But if he doesn't appear at Craster's, he's just not going to appear. That's just it. It's time to kiss him goodbye if he doesn't show up. Another thing I wanted to talk about, assuming that was all we had for that, was how Locke's plotline will affect things. With him, one thing I particularly like about this, I'll say off the top here, that I like about the addition of the Locke plotline is I always thought that was a bit lacking in A Storm of Swords. We know that the Boltons were looking for Brandon Rickon. The old man, the Nori, apparently, who's who he was, that Bran and the others find in a cave, the one who helps them, gives them some food, and then just asks them no questions, talks about how he's a friend of the Starks. He mentions that the Boltons are looking for them. I always kind of felt like their pursuit was a little lackluster. Not that they weren't necessarily trying, but we just didn't see much of it, and it seemed kind of ineffective. And that doesn't necessarily jive with what we know about the skill of Ramsay's hunters and Roos's people in general. The Dreadfort is very powerful. They have a lot of soldiers, and they have a lot of men. Bruce is a powerful guy. He's got to have some skilled people in his employ. Of course, in the books, there is no Locke, but surely he has someone of that ilk, someone who's an important, high-ranking guy that's talented and skilled and able to do this kind of thing. And we didn't see that in the books. I'm glad. I wouldn't call it an oversight. It's George's creation, and it's great. But I think this fleshes things out a little better because there should be some more pursuit of Brandon Rickon. It's too important. Their hold on the North is tenuous because of how well the Starks are loved. So certainly one thing we do know is that they're looking out for them. They're constantly vigilant of where are if these Starks appear. We got to grab them and get rid of them before anyone finds out. But we don't see it. So I'm glad to see it in the show.
Do you think Locke will die?
Yeah. I do, but I don't know when. I almost think that it might...
You think he'll get back to Roose and Ramsay?
No. Okay. But I do think he'll make a go of it. I think he'll get away and something will get him. Maybe no. I don't know that anyone will have a satisfactory revenge on him, but he will die. Either maybe the wildlings will get him or the others maybe will get him.
Yeah.
I think that the viewers will be satisfied that he's taken out, but none of the characters are going to have the satisfaction of killing him. Okay. But that's just a total guess, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Predicting a character that isn't in the books, we have no idea what's going to happen with him.
Yeah.
But I do think he's going to...
Hope dies.
That's true. I do think he's going to cause some serious problems along the way. But I think ultimately it might be he breaks his Night's Watch vow. I think that might be what comes to get him. I think we need to see a character break their Night's Watch vow and have something terrible happen to him. I think we need to see that happen. Although we kind of are going to see that happen with the Rogue Rangers. Because I think that they're certainly going to die. Yeah. I don't exactly know how. It could be Cold Hands. It could be John's group. And Locke may take a few of them out himself before turning on anyone. I doubt he's going to turn on them during the fight, assuming a fight happens. So it's interesting. This is one thing I alluded to is I really like not knowing where the story's going. It's like a fresh new thing. I have known what's been happening for so long. And... basically since the end of A Dance with Dragons and maybe some of these short stories. But in terms of this plot line, this is new and different, and I like it, and I am excited to see what is coming. I think that's all we have.
Yep.
So I hope you
Indeed.
enjoyed the spoiler portion of our Season 4, Episode 4 discussion. As you can see, we had a lot more to say. We couldn't possibly fit this in the other
No.
episode. We may have to do this
13
again.
minutes we were trying to think.
Yeah, we were thinking that, and this has ended up being 40. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
a bad estimation on my part, which I have become a bit famous for. Bad time estimations. But be it known that I was bad at time estimations before I ever started podcasting. I'm good at a lot of things, but not time estimations. So I'll have to get better at that. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We may have to do this again. As I said, we may have other surprises this season as the show deviates farther and farther from the book, something we predicted before the show even started, which we weren't podcasting back then. So you'll just have to take my word for it. The farther along the show gets, the more it's going to deviate from the books. If that's something disappointing to you, well, I'm sorry. I hope you can find a way to enjoy it, because I don't think it's going to let up on you. I think it's just going to keep changing and changing more and more. But I do think it's going to wind up in a lot of the same places. So at least there's that to hopefully keep you sane.
Okay.
If you're the type of person that really hates the changes, yeah, you might just have to stop watching, because there's going to be a lot of them. And it might spoil some things from the book. As much as I am counseling a moderate view of that, I definitely admit that it's very possible that the show will reveal some things from the books that might be better held until the books come out. But what choice do we have? It's that or try and sequester ourselves from all things Game of Thrones, which I'm not going to do that.
I guess I could just say it here, since I forgot to say it in the last episode. I might as well just mention it.
We keep forgetting that, don't we?
What?
Go ahead. Maybe we're not going to say the same thing.
Oh, yeah, maybe not. I was going to just, that other thing. I remembered what
We
you
can
were
talk
gonna
about
say.
that now.
Yeah, we can. That's cool. I was just going to mention that with the Grey Worm and Missandei stuff, I was thinking if there are any other differences we didn't mention, and this isn't related to that, but one change that I do like, just because I know that I'm apparently snobby and negative, and, no, I like to hold them to a higher standard, anyways, but I think I'm moderate in my opinion. But anyways, one change I did like is Grey Worm. We get some more exposition on Grey Worm's backstory in that scene with Missandei, and it's a scene with two people of color, nonetheless, which I think is HBO trying to respond to the criticism of the show in that regard, and they're doing it in one of the better ways they could do, which is they have some established characters right there, and they're expanding on them, and they're not, they're not terrible people, or they're not just adding someone in where there wasn't one, which I just
it's a
thought it was
touching
good.
moment, an intimate scene.
It's a touching moment. It's an intimate scene. They're two very popular characters, and it's nice to see. Like, Missandei is older, obviously, in the show. She's very young, so this wouldn't have happened in this book.
10-year-old, really.
So the difference, maybe they would have bonded, and I thought it was a nice scene, and I hope that we do see more, more people of color in the show. Honestly, yeah, I mean, we haven't seen her Dothraki since, we haven't seen one of her Blood Riders since season 2.
Yeah, Grey Worm is more of a character, and is a lot more prominent in a lot of ways in the book, or in the show, than he is in the book.
Yeah, and so that's a good
just
thing. To praise the show for what they did. But the exciting thing that I can't believe we forgot in the other one.
Right. Well, and we'll just have to announce it in our next week's episode as well. We'll probably just keep mentioning it every episode from now on for a while. We were invited to participate in an ebook, which will be a regularly published book as well. It's initially going to be published as an ebook and will be published in print as well. It's called Hymn for Spring. It's a Tower of the Hand publication. We'll be writing alongside our essay that we're contributing is about Harrenhal, and there's already a sample of it in Race for the Iron Throne, Stephen Atwell's new book on the politics of Westeros. He's a great writer.
You can find it on Amazon.
Yeah, and he is particularly honed in on political themes and structures and hierarchies in Westeros and Essos, and he's got a great mind for that sort of thing. They put a sample of our essay in that book as I suppose as a teaser and a way to get people excited. There's a lot of great essays are going to be in the book. Amin from a podcast of Ice and Fire, Johnny from Tower of the Hand. I don't have the list in front of me. There's going to be 9 or 10 essays, a lot of great topics. The release date is September 29th. Once again, it's called A Hymn for Spring. And I'm sure a lot of you guys who've listened to some of the other podcasts have probably already heard this advertised, although they may or may not have mentioned our involvement in it. So if you didn't know we were involved, now you do. And something to look forward to. It's still several months away, but
yeah, it'll be out. The book itself will be out at the end of September.
September 29th, that's right.
But as we said, our sample in Stephen Atwell's book is out now.
It's about 1,000-word sample, so you can get yourself teased on that. Also, that is also a good lead-in to what's coming later that next month. The World of Ice and Fire will be out in October. Of course, we don't have anything to do with that, except that it will turn our world upside down. It's going to give us...
we
already feel like we have
to that, and we'll be coming out with episodes very often. I think, where, and we'll have
to redo some of the old topics.
Yeah.
But it's going to be great and a lot of fun. By then, we hope to have some links up to help you guys can purchase the book through us for the same price.
Yeah.
But it would help us out a little bit, something we're working on in the background.
But,
the essay also explains, in part, why our January and February and part of March, why we were a bit slow coming out with our own episodes. The essay was taking time. And we put a lot of work into it, but we weren't allowed to talk about it until now. So we couldn't give our reasons for being so slow. So we had to be sneaky about it.
We also have perhaps been more leisurely than we could have we could have possibly been because of the World of Ice and Fire, I think, potentially, and the essay, of course, and just real life. But I think that does, in a little bit of a, psychologically a little bit affect us deep down, the knowing that, like, wow, there's going to be so much to change. We're going to be putting out so many episodes. Like, we're going to be having episodes out very often, and we'll probably go back and change them. And, like, as we discover more, we'll add stuff. It'll be a little bit different. We won't be spending, 2 months preparing for an episode.
Which is why we haven't done nearly as much of the history stuff. We've done more of the analysis, more of the predicting, more theorizing, more analyzing theories, more talking about the spoiler chapters, TV show, etc. All these things are a bridge to get to the new era of History of Westeros podcasts.
But that said,
we're pretty happy with what we've been doing here, and a lot of fun.
You're not good at reading my thoughts. But that said, we will have a history episode out fairly soon on the Sons of the Dragon.
Sons of the Dragon material probably not going to be in the World of Ice and Fire, which is one of the great reasons we can push it out. George read this stuff at a convention, stuff that probably won't be published until after this entire series is done. In other words, it might not see print for 10 years. Some of it will overlap with what's in the World of Ice and Fire. Some of it we won't see till then. We can't wait to give you guys some of that info because you're not going to see it anywhere else. So
I can't
stay
wait
tuned.
to get back into the history stuff.
Yeah, it's been a while, and we're eager to get back into that. It's our bread and butter. And I think we do a great job. Pat myself in the back, pat you in the back. My moment of immodesty there. I think we do a good job with these other episodes, but we're more comfortable doing the history stuff. It's what we started on. It's what we like to do, and we're good at wearing multiple hats, but. It'll be good to get back to...
I've only worn one hat on the show, and you've worn none, Steve, so I don't know what you're
It'll be good to get back to what we do best. So, without any further ado, it's time for our credits. Check us out on Facebook, Westeros History, at Westeros History on Twitter, www.historyofwesteros.com.
As well as www.historyofwesteros.com/forums, where our forums are. People discuss the episodes after the fact. We have different threads where you can talk about the episode with spoilers, as you who are watching this probably will want to, and without spoilers, where you could maybe... I don't think there's a lot of TV only viewer action, but you could laugh at them if there was any, potentially. Anyways, the forum is pretty cool. And we also...
if you'd like to make a donation to the show, again, it's you can go to our website, and there's a donate button right there in the middle. Donations really help us put out episodes more often, and of course, they're a great way to support the show.
The other thing, if you've watched this, probably already seen the other episode and heard Aziz say it. He's on another episode of another show today.
That's right. I was on Zap to It's show, promoted by Hypable as well, and we had a roundtable discussion of yesterday's episode as well, and it went really well. It was a lot of fun. It's not too long, but full of good information. 35 to 45 minutes of a bunch of people giving a lot of great information, a lot of great takes, a lot of great perceptions. So check that out while you're at it, and give them a shout out. Tell them you liked seeing me on there. Or if you didn't, tell them to stop wasting my time. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was a lot of fun. It was great. Certainly not a waste of time. It was awesome. I love talking with those guys. Yeah, right. If you do think that, then I do not agree with you. I had a great time, and it was a lot of fun. So,
all right.
That's it. Signing off. Valar Morghulis. See you next time.